Shalom Vayakhel, Shekalim. We're beginning the Arba Parshios this week, the four special Parshios that we read, leading us up to Rosh Chodesh Nisan and Pesach. So we're entering a new time of the year, just 2 weeks to Purim, and time runs along. Also, Shabbos Mevarchim this week, Chodesh Adar Sheni. So there's a lot going on. So we're going to try to pack it all in and get everything in to the Shir. Beginning of this week's Parsha, Vayakhel Moshe Rabbeinu gathers Klal Yisrael together. Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas b'nei Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu calls Klal Yisrael together, tells everybody to gather. Vayomer Alehem, he tells Klal Yisrael, he tells everybody together, Eile hadvorim asher tzivo Hashem la'asoi soisam. These are the things that Hashem is commanding you, la'asoi soisam, to do them. And then right away, we go off into something else. Moshe Rabbeinu says, everybody gather, everybody come here, listen to the commandments that Hashem is telling you to do, and right away we go off and we say, Sheishes Yomim Teosem Ulacha, that you work for 6 days a week, Uvayoim HaShvi'i, on the 7th day, Yihiyeh Lochem Kodesh, the 7th day of every week, as we know, is holy, Shabbat Shabbosoim Lashem. The 7th day of every week is Shabbos, and that's the way our Parsha begins. So the Yalkut Shimoni points out, he says that Rabbi Seinu Balei Agoda, that's what he calls them, they tell us that this is the only place in the Torah that when Moshe Rabbeinu, when we want to give a commandment, when we want to tell people what to do, it's the only place in the Torah where we're told to gather. Vayakhel Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu told everybody to gather together. And only over here in our Parsha, before being told something, so we were never told, okay, listen, everybody, you got to be together. You have to come here and be together. So, of course, that requires an explanation. If it's the only time and it's the only place, then, of course, there's a good reason for doing that. We're going to try to go into that a little bit. And let's just look at another phrase in the Pasuk. The Pasuk says, as we just mentioned before, in these Psukim, when we talk about Shabbos, it says, Eila advorim, before we talk about Shabbos, we say, Moshe Rabbeinu says, gather together, because these are the words, Asher tzivo Hashem is commanding you, la'asois oisam, to do them. Something proactive, something that you should go ahead and do. And as we said, you go right to the next Pasuk, and it doesn't look like it's a mitzvah haseh. It doesn't look like it's telling us to do anything, because the Torah goes right into telling us that you work for 6 days, but the 7th day you can't do malacha. 7th day is holy. So we're telling you what not to do. So why does the pasuk go ahead and say that gather together, because I'm telling you what you should do? A little bit different, right? What does that mean when I tell you what you should do and then tell you all the malachas of Shabbos, the mitzvahs loisa, say what you're not allowed to do on Shabbos? So the Nesivos Shalom explains, and he says, from the Sefer HaKadosh, from the Noam Elimelech, Zechusei Yogan Aleinu, at the beginning of Parshas Devarim, and he speaks about, over there, the Noam Elimelech speaks about something very interesting. You ever know, especially those of us who daven Nusach Sfar, many times before we do a mitzvah, before you do something holy, so we say L'Shem Yichud. We say something called, right, L'Shem Yichud, and we continue along, and we say that before we do a mitzvah, and we end off the L'Shem Yichud by saying B'Shem Kol Yisrael. That we are doing this, we're dedicating what we're doing, this mitzvah, B'Shem Kol Yisrael, in the name of all of Klal Yisrael. And we're saying each time that we do a mitzvah, that we're not just doing it for ourselves. We're doing it b'shem all of the Jews. We're doing it b'shem all of Klal Yisrael. And the Noam Elimelech explains that we have to understand, why do we do this? And the reason makes so much sense that it's just a beautiful thing to hear. He says people by nature, just the nature of people by nature are imperfect. I hate to surprise anyone here. I don't want to surprise anyone, but guess what? None of us, nobody is perfect. And believe it or not, right, the Pasuk says in Koheles, Perek Zayin, famous Pasuk, that is Adam ein tzadik ba'aretz asher yaseh toiv v'lo yechta. There is no person in the world who does only good and never sins. People are imperfect by nature. That's the way it is. So a person goes ahead, and throughout the day sometimes we do things, and some things we slip up. We don't daven as well as we should. We don't learn as well as we should. We interrupt. We might speak things that we really shouldn't. People do things throughout the day, and they do averos. That's the nature of a person. And the question is, how does that same person, after you do something wrong, you want to go ahead and you want to do a mitzvah, and even possibly with the same limb that just did an avera? I'll give you an example, just a wild example. Right? A person walks by, and he walks by a fruit stand, and he's hungry. He says, he's not going to mind. He takes an apple, and he takes a bite out of the apple. So he just stole with his hand. And then it could be a few minutes later, an hour later, it comes time to do a mitzvah, to put on tefillin on your hand, to hold a lulav and esrog with your hand, to do any kind of mitzvah with your hand. But that hand just did an avera. How do we understand how it's possible to do? How could the kedusha rest on a part of a person who just did something with that same limb against the Ratzon Hashem? But there's something, says the Noam Elimelech, that every Jew has to be aware of, and that's a very, very key thing that we're speaking about now. That there's a special world in this universe. There's a special world called the world of Kol Yisrael. The world of all Klal Yisrael as a whole. The Jewish people as a whole. There's one world of individuals where you are you and I am me, right? And every person here is themselves. But there's another world. Every single one of us is part of a world of Achdus, part of a world of Klal Yisrael that is called Kol Yisrael. And in that world of Kol Yisrael, there's no such thing as sin. There's no such thing as hate. Nobody can make a dent in that world. When we are together, when Jews are together, nobody could do anything to that world. Nothing affects it. Not one person's averos, nothing. The world of Kol Yisrael is never tarnished. It's never affected by individual acts. As the Pasuk tells us, we know this Pasuk, V'yamech kulam tzadikim, says in Nesivos Shalom, that when we are in a state of V'yamech kulam, when we're together as Jews, when we all understand that we're one, and despite the fact that we may look a little different, we may act a little different, we may live in different places, we may do different things, we have different minhagim, but v'amech kulam, when we're all together as one nation, then tzadikim. Sins, averos, are only subscribed to individuals and the world of individuals. So if you consider yourself only part, if somebody's just full of themselves, and they're always looking into themselves, then you're part of that world of averos. You're part of the world where averos stick to you. But in the world of Klal Yisrael, in that world that every one of us should be part of, when we're together, the Yetzer Hara has no jurisdiction in that world. So when a Jew wants to do a mitzvah, as we say, a Yid comes and he wants to do a mitzvah, we begin by saying L'shem Yichud B'Shem Kol Yisrael. I may have done something wrong with my arms, my legs, my head. I may have done my eyes. I may have done something wrong just before. And now I want to do a mitzvah. So I'm doing the mitzvah not just for myself. I'm saying l'shem yichud b'shem kol Yisrael. I want to be part of this world. I am part of this world, I'm saying, of all Yidden together. We include ourselves into that world of Klal Yisrael, that world where there are no flaws, although we ourselves as individuals may be very flawed, but in that world of Klal Yisrael, that always remains whole. And now back to our parsha. When Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain, Moshe Rabbeinu came down, Klal Yisrael had worshipped the Egel. Moshe Rabbeinu broke the luchos. He went back up, and he came down the mountain. So what did Moshe Rabbeinu do? He did just as we're saying. Moshe Rabbeinu, dafki here, and only in this place when they had just transgressed a great sin of the Egel. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to get forgiveness, and Moshe Rabbeinu comes down. He says, you know how we're going to do this? Vayakhel. Vayakhel Moshe. He's giving us the lesson that the way we continue, the way we grow as people, the way we grow as individuals, is when we can be together. Moshe Rabbeinu is delivering the message, that message, by gathering everyone together. And you know what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying? Moshe Rabbeinu was saying that Hashem was considering the Chet HaEgel, the sin of the Egel, of the golden calf. Hashem was considering that an individual sin. Hashem was saying, Vayakhel, in this message, Moshe Rabbeinu is getting everyone together and say, if we're together, and we're ba'achdus, and we're together as a nation, then even something so grievous as the Chet of the Egel, even something like that, Hashem is looking at it, that was just individual sinning. It does not tarnish, it does not affect the world of Klal Yisrael. The world, the nation of Klal Yisrael, that world would still remain intact. And that was a big message of confidence for Bnei Yisrael. They didn't know how they just did such a big sin. And Moshe Rabbeinu went to ask forgiveness. Moshe Rabbeinu was telling them that message, that no, Hashem will consider this a sin of individuals. And now by Akel Moshe Rabbeinu said, everyone, whatever shevet you belong to, whatever group you're part of, whatever Rebbe or teacher or sect of Klal Yisrael you subscribe to, by Akel Moshe, we have our own world. We have a world here of Klal Yisrael together. So Moshe Rabbeinu gathered us and taught us about this special world, the world of when we stick together. And of course, this message resounds today. People know there's a lot of talk now. We know about achdus, about getting together, and we hope that it's a tremendous chus for Klal Yisrael, that we're showing Hashem that aside from being individuals, we also all subscribe to one nation. We're all one together, but the idea is to keep it that way. The idea is that Vayakhel Moshe, that when we gather, and today when you see Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, Yidden in Chutz La'aretz, all over the world, we're all gathering together. We're all saying we're one. We're Klal Yisrael. We're there for each other. We don't have anything bad to say about people who are different than us. We're all coming together as one nation. We want it to last. And that's something that every single person has to work on. To not dwell and focus on our differences. We have to focus on the fact that we are all one. And we all know that if we're not there for each other, there's no one there for us. Everywhere in the world, they don't like us. They don't like seeing Jews successful, and they don't like seeing Jews succeed in anything. But if we're here for each other, and we're one group, nothing can stop us. And that's why Akel Moshe has kol adas b'nei Yisrael. Dafka, now at this time, Moshe Rabbeinu is teaching us, stay together, be together, and when you're part of that world of Klal Yisrael, you can do anything, and Hashem forgives you for things. Hashem loves to see Klal Yisrael together as one.